This is the Poison Terminator podcast. My name is Carlo Diolim. 96% of recreational water outbreaks occurred in public pools, hot tubs, or water playgrounds from 2015 to 2019, according to a recent report published by the CDC. Today we'll speak with the author of this article, Michele Hlavsa. She's the chief of the CDC Health Swimming Program. We'll discuss the causes of these outbreaks and how to prevent them. Welcome to the podcast, Michele.
Thanks for having me.
Can you tell me what were the most frequent pathogens causing these outbreaks?
So we saw 200 outbreaks for the years 2015 to 2019. 75% of those outbreaks had an identified cause. So about a little over 150 outbreaks, we knew what caused those outbreaks. The two leading causes of the outbreaks were Cryptosporidium, a parasite that causes diarrhea, and Legionella, a bacteria that can cause severe pneumonia.
How does Legionella and Cryptosporidium appear in the water of the public aquatic settings that had the outbreaks?
So Cryptosporidium is a fecal-oral parasite. So basically what happens is someone with diarrhea jumps in the water and has a diarrheal incident in the water, and then someone else swallows that water. So that parasite is going from one person to another. We share the water we swim in. Legionella, on the other hand, it's just normally in the environment. And if we go in or near a hot tub, the jets on the hot tub aerosolize the water, carrying the bacteria, and then someone inhales that bacteria and can develop a pneumonia called Legionnaire's disease, or they could develop flu-like symptoms, which are milder, and those are known as that's known as Pontiac fever.
Do the disinfection methods play any role in the appearance of these microbes?
So with Cryptosporidium, you can have a well-maintained pool in terms of it being properly treated and still have a Cryptosporidium outbreak, or an outbreak caused by Cryptosporidium. So oftentimes, when we see outbreaks, we think, oh, we have an outbreak because the water's not being treated properly, the pool's not being operated properly. But when there's a Cryptosporidium outbreak, that's not necessarily the case. Most germs are inactivated or killed by the chlorine concentrations that we recommend at CDC for public pools, hot tubs, water playgrounds. And that state and local governments here in the U.S. recommend, and I'm sure it's not that different in Canada. Within minutes, most of the bacteria, the viruses, they'll be killed or inactivated. With Cryptosporidium, on the other hand, in properly chlorinated water, this parasite can survive for 7 or more days. So it's not really about good operation and management. It's about really swimmers bringing that parasite into the water, so swimming while they're ill with diarrhea. Legionella, on the other hand, is an indication of issues with operation and management of a hot tub. While, Legionella is an environmental contaminant, we see outbreaks caused by Legionella when we're not maintaining the chlorine level the way we ought to be, we're not changing the water often enough, we're not keeping surfaces clean in terms of checking for biofilm or slime and making sure that it's scrubbed off. And so outbreaks caused by Legionella, they definitely indicate an operation or management problem.
Why are there more outbreaks in public aquatic venues in this report than in ocean, lakes, river, and ponds, which are untreated recreational water venues?
Well, more people have access to pools and hot tubs and water playgrounds than, to the coast. I mean, sometimes we'll have to drive, 60 miles, 100 kilometers to get to a coastline. And at least in the U.S., we find that people are willing to travel close to 50 to 100 miles just to spend the day at the beach. That means that you have a lot of people potentially meeting at a place, but then geographically dispersing across a wide geographic area. And it's going to be harder to connect dots between cases of illness or people who are sick across a wild geographic area. Whereas with a pool, people are going to the pool are probably from the same town or the town over. So it's going to be much easier to link them, to identify that there's a connection, and then to start investigating and picking up on the outbreak. The other piece is also you're just sharing the water with more people. A backyard pool, maybe a neighbor pops by, but it's usually just people from your household or, your family that comes for the weekend. There's not as many people in the water. Whereas if you're going to your town pool, there's a lot more people getting in that water. So for outbreaks like Cryptosporidium, where someone's bringing in the germ into the water, in this case the parasite, well, then there's probably increased risk of being exposed or becoming infected with the germ.
How can recreational water venue operators or managers prevent waterborne illness outbreaks?
So when we're talking about pool operators, the most important thing they can do is make sure that their chlorine or bromine level is where it needs to be. CDC recommends 1 part per million at least in pools and water playgrounds. In terms of hot tubs, at least 3 parts per million free chlorine or bromine. And in that case, when we're talking hot tubs, we're talking 4 parts per million. But the key thing is just making sure that disinfectant level is where it needs to be and that the pH is where it needs to be. CDC recommends a pH of 7.2 to 7.8, and that's important because that's like a sweet spot for pH. If the pH is in that range, then you're balancing how much germ-killing power your disinfectant, your chlorine or bromine has. You are making sure your equipment's not getting corroded, and you're making sure swimmers are comfortable in the water. Now, pool operators, they have test kits that they can do to check the chlorine level and the pH. But, we as swimmers can check the chlorine or bromine level and the pH as well. We can use test strips that we get at our superstores or pool supply stores or hardware stores. And they're just strips that you dip into the water, follow the manufacturer's directions, and you as a swimmer can check that out before you get in the water.
Can you tell us about the Model Aquatic Health Code of the CDC and tell us how this can help reduce waterborne outbreaks?
So the Model Aquatic Health Code is a set of CDC recommendations on how to design, construct, operate, and manage a recreational water venue, a public recreational water venue, a pool, a hot tub, a water playground, and to do it in a way that prevents injury and illness. So whether we're having outbreaks of illness, whether we're talking about pool chemical injuries or we're talking about drowning, it's all about prevention and minimizing the risk of illness and injury. So what happened is in the early 2000s, CDC, Aquatics, state and local public health partners here in the U.S. got together and said, how do we stop the drownings, the outbreaks from happening? And they found that the biggest barrier to preventing that would be that there are different rules all over the U.S. on how to operate these venues and manage them and construct them and design them, and we need to come up with a standard way of doing things. And so CDC and the New York State Department of Health got together and they led an effort across the U.S., across aquatics, across public health, to say, hey, here is the best science, and if we don't have the best science, here are the best practices that we can put into action to prevent these illnesses and injuries. And the first version of the Model Aquatic Health Code came out in 2014, and right now we're working on putting out the 4th edition sometime later this year. And honestly, it's just about following the science and best practices to make sure that people aren't drowning, pool chemical injuries aren't happening, and these outbreaks are prevented.
Is this code only for public swimming pools managed by the government?
So in the U.S., when we talk about public swimming pools, we talk about pools that aren't in somebody's backyard, that are intended for the public or members. So here in most jurisdictions, when we're talking in the U.S. about public pools, we're talking about, the pools at the hotel, the pools at the water parks, the pools at the apartment complex or condo association or homeowners association pools. So anything that a person, anyone from the public can go to or members can go to. So that is what the MAC is trying to regulate. It's the public pools. So it can be a city or county run pool, but it's a bigger category than that.
How many states adopted the Model Aquatic Health Code?
So we have got to do a better job tracking that. There are states that have at least partially adopted the Model Aquatic Health Code, and the state of New Mexico has fully adopted the Model Aquatic Health Code. There are also county and city governments that have partially adopted the code. So there's a lot of jurisdictions that have, but I think there's way more jurisdictions that utilize the Model Aquatic Health Code. So when the Model Aquatic Health Code was written, it was written as a code and an annex. And the code is actually the quote-unquote standards by which, you're going to do things, the way you're going to treat the water, you're going to filter the water, etc. The annex provides the rationale, and I've actually heard from our public health partners that they go to the annex much more often than they go to the code. Like they'll go to the code, but then the annex is where the meat is, all the science that backs up why you're doing what you're doing. And so as jurisdictions educate pool operators about how to run pools safely and engage the public in healthy swimming, I'm hearing they're referencing the annex. That's not to say we're not adopting the Model Aquatic Health Code, but it takes time. Adopting laws and enacting them and implementing them, all that takes time.
Is there anything you would like to add?
Well, if your listeners want to learn more about healthy swimming, they can go to cdc.gov/healthy swimming, one word.
And is there a site for the Model Aquatic Health Code?
Yes, cdc.gov/MAHC.
Okay, Michele, thank you for taking the time to answer our questions.
Well, thank you for having me and helping me spread the word about healthy swimming.
And thank you to all for listening. If you have any comments, please send them to tptpodcast@mail.com. I'm the Poison Terminator. I'll be back soon with another episode. Have a great day.